Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Roberts Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for what is today. I think today is July 10th, Thursday, July 10th. Well, a lot of rotation again on the tape today. I'll go over some of those moves with you. I'll also give you a little bit of perspective about some of those moves and some of the traps that you're seeing in growth land, which are making the rounds that I see. Before I do that, risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only. Please read the full risk disclaimer right there. So just a couple numbers for the day, which again, I like to go over this spreadsheet just to give you a sense of what did well versus what did not. And, there was a couple of standout areas for today. Number one, Bitcoin made another new high today. The Bitcoin ETF was up 1.5% for the day, so that's very nice. And small caps, the breadth was particularly good today. I'm going to bring up a chart of RSP, which is the equally weighted ETF, which made a nice move. But not every name, not every area of the market went up today. And again, if you're kind of sitting and a couple different things I'll kind of talk about here about, I know folks like to keep sometimes like, they like to keep a very slim watch list. Hey, I'm only going to watch these names, right? Well, that works when you've got, when you've got very small scope of names that are working, and it's good to get to know, how names behave and how they act. I mean, that's a good thing to do, but it's also good to kind of broaden that out a little bit too, because look at how many areas were green on the day, and you had some groups that performed pretty well that again are just basically coming up from underperforming and from the lows a little bit. Transports were up 2.5% today. Metals and mining, a lot of that was MP Materials, but there were also a lot of other metals names that were strong today. The home builders have been continuing to move up over the last week. Consumer discretionary was in the green today. Leisure, and that was carried by the airlines. The Jets ETF was up over 7% today. So, the way that I kind of think about some of these groups is that you don't have to stay married to them. If you if one of the things that you do is you're mostly a growth trader and you're mostly looking at high growth names. Um, you could kind of treat those names as longer term holdings, and you can mess around with some of the other groups that are moving up. There's a few different things that helps to kind of spot things. Number one is to basically go through, have a sector watch list and go through some sectors and see what's moving up. And, at the end of the day, some of this stuff, if you're a technical trader, you can look at charts without even symbols on them and you can see if they're good setups. So that's one way to kind of tackle it and say, okay, well, these are just trades. For example, I've seen a couple, like I also watch the tape and I watch a little bit of option activity, but you know PSX, which was an energy name that I've traded before, that I saw option activity in, and I've traded that name before. That kind of was a bit familiar to me, and that's had a really nice move over the last couple days. GSK, which is a healthcare name, European healthcare name, also saw a lot of option activity. So there's some hints that the option activity is telling you where some of the movements are going. The other thing too is when you broaden out your view a little bit and look at some of these other areas, when these things go in and out in terms of favor, right? Where you're going to see sometimes energy names outperform, or sometimes you're going to see consumer discretionary and leisure names, right? Some people, sometimes it's the restaurant names that do well, right? And every once in a while I see people talking about a kava or something like that, right? The more that you can kind of get yourself familiar with some of these areas. Again, you don't have to trade all these names all the time. But when energy, we've had energy go from time to time and it trends, right? If you get to know some of the energy names, right, the more that you kind of get familiar with those names, when those names begin to pick up some momentum and trend again, you go right to that playbook. Right. And I keep a lot of my watch lists in FinViz, for example, but you could use various different systems for this. But you could go back to you set up your watch list once, And then you can go back to it and say, hey, look at energy stocks are really starting to fly. And then you can go into that watch list, find a couple different names, and begin to kind of trade those groups. So there's a lot of different things. And I think that for like my basis is like I never really want to get too hooked in to trades and get emotional about trades, because I know that this market always is changing. And the more that you can get comfortable with different groups and adapting to the market, the more that I think that you're going to do better overall. If you're just watching a few different names, that's great when those names work. But there's going to be times where those names where people see profit taking, and we'll begin to kind of look at the charts of some names too. But before I do that, I just want to bring up a spreadsheet too, which kind of will give you a sense. And I send this in my in my end of day note to members. So let me just stop the screen share for a minute. So if you're following along in Substack, sorry, bear with me. You're familiar with this spreadsheet because I sent it. So it's kind of, this is like a momentum screen of um of sectors. Take a look at all the ones that are above the 5, the 20, and the 50-day moving average, which basically means they're trending, and they're trending very nicely. The majority of groups outside of course, like consumer staples, which by the way is like, that's actually like a good thing that consumer staples are kind of weak, right? Other areas are doing very well. So even though there's been a little bit of weakness in tech, tech actually came back from the lows today and still finished down for the day, but still above the 5, 20, and 50-day moving averages, right? One area that's not is kind of starting to kind of come down a little bit is communications and and software a bit today. So again, seeing some profit taking, that's my thought. Another thing I think that you're seeing right now is retail is so bullish, and that's been the story, and retail has been right. I'm not knocking retail, but I think that they're continuing to kind of look at all these setups and go crazy into some of these setups. And what I think the institutions are the ones that are saying, thank you very much. Like, I'll take profits, and I'm taking profits anyway. So they're selling into some of the strength. All right, let's get to some charts. And so the first one that I'm going to bring up here is RSP. So again, I'm just going to stop sharing, reshare, and this is the equally weighted S&Ps, right? So this gives you a sense of like what's going on right now, right? This made a new high for the year. It doesn't, I don't think this is a new all-time high, but again, it just shows that there's decent participation in this market. Now, I'm going to show you a couple other, we talked about cyber. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the reason why cyber got hit that hard today, but it's also, all of these things are extended, right? And I've talked about this a little bit, and I've been a little bit wrong about this too. But so here's cyber, and by the way, it's just coming down to some support. By the way, it's just the fact that support is a long ways away down to here, right? Now let's look at Qs for a minute. It's the same thing with the Qs, by the way. We're extended. Look how far we are away from the July value area and the 20-day moving average. So why do I bring this up? Am I making a prediction that the same thing that happened to cyber stocks is going to happen to the Qs? No, I'm not making that prediction, but I'm also being realistic here and just saying, hey, I've got to get myself to basically understand that we're extended here. And if there is going to be really real big institutional selling, yeah, there's an air pocket all the way down here. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this for a second, but again, it doesn't mean that that you're going to get that this is going to happen, you know, tomorrow or the next day, because I've been talking about this for probably more than a week that, hey, we're decently extended away from the 20-day moving average. For now, we're trending, but I think that you want to be aware, have some downside alerts to say that we're pretty decently extended. Right. And there's also like the RSI is giving a little bit of a divergence here where it's not making new highs. So this is not currently the strongest area of the market right now. It's more possibly seeing some profit taking. And I think that there's a chance that you could continue to see that into next week. Netflix reports next Thursday, right? So they're going to have to show the proof of, and they've been coming in. I actually tried trading Netflix. By the way, I'm not perfect. I tried buying the dip in a couple things today. Like I tried buying some Netflix today and I sold out of it. I tried buying a little bit of CrowdStrike today. I didn't get the immediate confirmation that those trades were going well, although I did get one target in Netflix. But that's fine. Let these things come down a little bit, right? And think about it too. Next week when Netflix reports, do you want to be looking at going long Netflix for earnings if it's all the way up at 1350? Would you want it to come down to the 20-day moving average to be more of a buying opportunity? Because I think it's going to be very, very difficult. If you have all these names that are sitting at extended and way above moving averages going into earnings reports, do you think that the expectations are going to be super high or reasonable? So again, I'm just trying to give you a little bit of perspective. That doesn't mean that this is easy to trade on a day-to-day basis, but it also means we're kind of getting into the summertime, and choppiness and some false breakouts are going to happen. Right. And I traded, I kind of just at the end of the day, even though I've been burned by this name, and that's why I've been kind of reluctant, I've been reluctant to get back into this name, but this name's been underperforming like this. And again, if you don't believe me, take a look at the SMH. Now, again, a setup is a setup, right? But you got to understand when a setup doesn't work. But here's ALAB versus the SMH ETF. Right? ALAB, yeah, it's been underperforming a little bit, right? So SMH has been the overall group has been performing better, right? But this name, you should not be shocked by this, right? If you've noticed what this name has been doing, every time it tries to break higher, there's a seller in this thing, right? That keeps knocking it down. So, that's an individual stock situation, because you certainly have there. This is not all of growth that's acting bad. You're seeing other growth names do okay, right? So, but this is one that it seems to be a lot of people are watching because it looks like a good looking setup. One other thing, so make adjustments with this stuff, and that's what I did yesterday. I said, okay, it did break my level, so I'll put on a small starter position. And then what I did this morning was I took a profit target in it. Why did I take a profit target in this thing this morning? Because if you've been watching this thing, it's been tricky as hell, right? Every time it gets to the breakout point, and the 1 hour chart is great for looking at this, stall, 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 stall. So, hey, traded up to 103 this morning. I put some money and put it in my pocket, right? Because I bought it at what 98 yesterday. So that's how this thing has been trading. If it broke out and moved and pushed to new highs, that would be actually unusual because that's not what's been happening with this stock. It's been failing every time at the breakout level. So please look at these things and look at them objectively. Don't get caught in the FOMO about what's going on in social media about how great a setup is, right? Notice how it's been behaving. It has not been behaving very well, right? And that's the same thing with a couple other names. Toast, look at it. Here's the last high. Every time it gets back up to here, it doesn't make it. Failure, 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 failure. That's what you should be expecting when you go into this trade, is that, hey, you could be optimistic about it, but be very careful because that has been the pattern of this name over the last 2 months, is it fails every time it goes higher. So if you're going to play with it, there's nothing wrong with trying it out, but put on a starter position and understand how the stock has been behaving. Right now, there's been other names that are not acting that way. Coinbase, it's been more methodical, right? Move into some support and touch new highs and then broke out to new highs, right? You also have the tailwind of what's going on with Bitcoin, right? So that's how I would kind of analyze things, right? And I know what tends to happen too is when we have a move in with growth stocks, as we've had over the last couple months, everybody thinks that that's how the world is supposed to go going forward. Yeah, I'm going to find another growth stock and it's going to break out to all-time highs. Be realistic, please. This is not how the market behaves all the time, right? And the more that you get yourself associated with this and being a disciplined trader, you're going to have better results. Again, not to say today was not a great day for me either, but I'm not going to get trapped in the names that just continue to trap people, right? And again, it's not, don't fall into that, don't fall into the same pattern, right? Of, yeah, of making these types of mistakes. Now, I want to talk about a couple other things here, right? And again, this is not the most exciting, I'm giving you 3 new stock picks here. No, we could do that all day long. That's what we do in the trading room every single day is we find, we find trade ideas, and, we tend to make money off of those ideas, right? That's par for the course, right? Where you really separate yourself as being good in this game is worrying about your downside risk, right? Now, again, that's not worrying about everything that could go wrong. You have to be optimistic in this game to do well, but you also have to protect your downside and think about scenarios where things aren't going to work. I'm going to take you to what happened to this market last year around this time, right? And again, history does not repeat exactly the same, so please don't take it that way. But notice where we were last July, right? Does this look similar to you? A little bit similar to you? We got overbought here a couple times, right? We kind of hung out here a little bit, and then we started to break lower. Right? Look at the 5-day moving average, decently above the 20-day. I think we're even more extended now. We're more extended than where we were last year, right? So just keep in mind, we had about a 9% correction. Now, again, I'm not saying that we get that, but we've already had one correction this year. We usually get a couple corrections a year. That could be anywhere from 2%, 5%, 7%. If I had to guess, total guess is we don't get a big of a correction as we got earlier in the year, but we could definitely see some type of a move down, right? So there's a couple things that you could do here. And now, first of all, I'm not saying that this happens the same way, right? This was the first time that we broke the 20-day moving average was the 17th of July. So right after the mid point of July. Now, seasonality for this month is still supposed to be pretty decent. So I think you just kind of want to understand what could happen, right? And also, there's nothing wrong with buying some puts. I did that today. I bought a little bit of puts in SPY today, going out to August expiration, just in case something like this happens, right? And again, that's an insurance policy. I would rather be buying a little bit of insurance while your house isn't on fire, right? So people will always tend to look for, oh my God, I need to buy puts when you've already had a little bit of a correction. So I would rather do it here, and it's a hedge. I don't want the puts to work because I'm going to have some open positions, but I'm buying a little bit of insurance here because the summer could be filled with a little bit of difficult markets. And yeah, so it wouldn't surprise me if we get some type of a correction. Again, I don't think it plays out the same type of move, but we're sitting here and we've got earnings, and I think that's going to be the catalyst for now. So, what else did I want to go over? I will give you, I will go through a couple setups. I went over coin, Bitcoin. So let's end on a positive note. I mean, Bitcoin, really nice follow through move. Some setups are going to work, some are not. That's life, guys. This one is working quite well, right? So, when the other thing too that I'm sorry to be so negative in this video, but when the market is acting really well, right, the market will bail you out of any mistakes that you make, right? But when the market slows down a little bit, right? And if you're not trading disciplined, right? And if you're not dotting your I's and crossing your T's with risk management, it's going to hurt a little bit more. So that's something just to be mindful of. Robinhood, by the way, there's plenty of good things that are working nicely. Look at what Robinhood did today, right? But it's just not every growth stock right now, right? And some are seeing corrections. LUE had a nice move today. Now, I didn't participate in this one today. I actually bought a little bit of NRG today. This is a name that I've been in and out of, and I've been in it now for a bit, but buying some support at the 50-day moving average. See if it holds the 50-day moving average. All right. Couple other names from my watch list. GEV did okay today. Looks like INOQ did okay today. Whoops. Still kind of hanging out here. Hasn't done really that much that well. RGTI is correcting a little bit. I would be a buyer probably back into this 12 level. Uh, anything else that I wanted to go? Zillow had a nice growth stock. Again, for whatever reason, nobody seems to want to touch some of the moves in real estate. Zillow's a growth stock. Heck of a move that this. So please expand your watch list a little bit. BLDR, since that I think it was the CEO who had a big insider buy. This has been acting really well. A couple other, what else was I looking at? If you really want to go off the tangent, a little bit of looking at some of the underperformers, I'm watching this Peabody Energy, right? This is a name that's already had a big decline and now it's basing and it's trying to come out of the base. It's pretty much like a textbook trade. Another one that I looked at is AMR. This is a coal name, a little bit harder of a name here, but watch to see if it can get above the 50-day moving average. This might work for a short-term trade. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to go into too much, but I hope these live streaming, these videos help you a little bit, right? There's a lot of things to be learning from your trading, right? And I've been doing this for a long time, and it's always something where, I try to continuously improve and adapt to what the market is telling me, what the market is giving me, right? And it's not going to be the same group of stocks all the time. I hate to tell you that. Have a great night, guys. See you tomorrow.